Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming along to this, the last Wellbeing evening for the year. However, next year we do have another timetable of very good talks, but none more important than the one we have tonight on Am I Fat? I'm Dr. Alan Shell from the Wolper board, chairman of the committee that puts on the Wellbeing evenings, and I thank you all for coming along tonight. The question is, am I fat? Am I fat? We've got an obesity epidemic, we have the wrong diet, we're getting plagued by the media, there's going to be a tax on sugar, so all these things are happening, and we worry about my BMI, my waist measurement, and changes with age. And in bringing that topic to sort of a more of a very communicating sort of topic, we're going to introduce Julie McCrossan, who is our moderator. Julie's a very well-known ABC radio, TV network trainer and speaker. She's been involved with the Wolper for a number of years now, doing our Q&A. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our very important guests tonight, Professor Tim Gill, Professor Katherine Samaras, Susie Burrell, and Professor Bruce Neal. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Julie McCrossan. Thank you.
We need enthusiastic clapping because we're going to do things with our body throughout this session to burn calories. Okay? Here we are. Are we fat? Yes, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming because we're competing with the Jewish Film Festival, so we're extra grateful that you've come. And our aim tonight is to talk about weight gain and its impact on health and what we can do about it. That's it in a nutshell. And I'll introduce each of our guests in more detail as I bring them into our conversation. And for those of you who've been before, you'll know there'll be multiple opportunities to ask questions or make brief comments, and I will whiz amongst you with surprising speed, but I never let go of the microphone. I'll hold it close to your mouth so that we get plenty of volume. So I'd like to begin by introducing Professor Tim Gill. If you could wave, Tim, so they know who you are. And Tim is a Professor of Public Health Nutrition at the Boden Institute, which is concerned with obesity, nutrition, exercise and eating disorders. And he's Principal Research Fellow in the Prevention Research Collaboration in the School of Public Health at the University of Sydney. And he's authored several major reports on obesity and chronic disease, both nationally and internationally. Will you make him welcome? And from now on, when you clap, stamp your feet as well. That's just that extra bit of exercise. We'll talk about its connection and not to weight loss. So please try again. Professor Tim Gill. And Tim, if you could pick up the microphone and hold it close to your mouth. We've called it Understanding BMI Waist Measurements and Changes with Age. So let's just cut to the chase. How do we know as individuals whether we're overweight?
Look, there are a variety of measures which your doctor might take, or if you go to see other health professionals like Susie, they might measure your waist circumference, they might put you on the scales, measure your height and weight and calculate your BMI.
So let's talk about what does BMI stand for and how do you calculate it and how significant is it in terms of understanding whether you need to lose weight or not?
I think you can forget about it. It's the body mass index. It's a ratio of your height over your weight, over your height, which is sort of a proxy measure of fatness in the body.
The reproduction of sound is in the top, so you sort of tip it towards, yeah, that's it.
Sorry, I'm not a professional at this game.
But he's slim, and does that build confidence in us? It
no.
Does.
What I really wanted to say, though, is that yes, there are a variety of measures which we can apply at a clinical level or at a research level. But the bottom line for most people is they know when they're getting fat. They know when their weight starts to impact upon their health and well-being. It starts to weigh them down a bit. Their back starts to ache. Their knees start to ache. Their feet, are bearing the weight. It's harder to do up, the trousers or the skirt. These are the signs which are more important at a personal community level than worrying about, those more clinical measures.
So because there are other voices in the community and in the health community that do talk about the value of BMI and do give us like paper, what are those called? Tape measures which have red on them if you're too thick, and they say your weight, your waist measurement is an indicator of danger. You're downplaying that. In a nutshell, why are you less convinced of the usefulness of those measures?
I know, I am extremely convinced of their usefulness for the clinician to interpret, but for the individual, there are some more obvious signs that doesn't require them to get on the scales and go onto a computer and work out what their BMI is and put it against the classification system that's there, or to try and run a tape measure around their waist. So, I mean, the most important thing is what's happening in terms of whether you can feel your weight going up, or whether it's staying stable. If it's staying stable, great. If it's going up, then it's a problem, regardless of what your BMI might be, or regardless of what your waist is. The most important thing is to prevent yourself gaining more weight, regardless of what your weight is at this point in time.
And when we met initially this evening, Professor Gill said one of my messages is don't focus too much on the actual weight. So you're interested in progression rather than actual weight. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think that that gaining weight in adult life is gaining fat. Unless you're down that gym pumping weights, any weight you gain is fat, basically. And as you grow older, unfortunately, because of certain hormonal changes in your body and changes in your occupational and the amount of exercise you get, you tend to put on fat and lose a little bit of muscle mass anyway. So even though your weight's staying the same, you're probably becoming a little bit more fat regardless. So the real focus for me in terms of the best and primary outcome is to prevent weight gain. Now, I'm not saying that your absolute weight is irrelevant, because clearly it's not. If you're significantly overweight, then the clinician's going to want to do something about that. But you, at a personal level, I see the most appropriate focus in keeping your weight stable. And that brings gains to your future health, and it's achievable, much more achievable than losing weight.
Look, I'm going to come back to you, obviously, but if I could ask Professor Bruce Neal to pick up a microphone. And Bruce is Senior Director of Food Policy at the George Institute for Global Health. He's a Professor of Medicine at the University of Sydney and a Professor of Clinical Epidemiology at Imperial College London. Everyone's having a think about gaining weight now. Is it up to the individual, or is it up to our government and private sector agencies in the way they construct our environment and control our food as to whether we can lose weight? So if we can stop gaining or try to lose if our doctors told us to, is it about the individual, or is it about the environment, or is it a bit of both? What have you learned?
So I'm a big fan of the nanny state. We should just get that out there right now. You can throw things at me if you want.
What do you mean? Explain what you mean.
Well, I firmly believe that the world has not changed into a population of sloths and gluttons over the last 20 years. People are basically the same. They would still much rather be thin and exercising and eating healthy diets, but they now live in a swamp where they're surrounded by low cost, low quality, highly convenient, habituating foods which are pushed at them all the time, sold everywhere, and it's just really, really hard in the current environment not to gain weight, and even harder to lose weight. So, individuals, that they do have some free will, but you're actually probably mostly deluded about how much free will you think you have, because you're being manipulated the whole time by big business.
Where's the hope?
Well, we've seen a bit of debate about sugar tax today. I'm not sure it's likely to happen, but I think it's...
Well, let me put it in a different way. What are the strategies that community leaders can put in place to help the individuals in the population to either stop weight gain or reduce it for the sake of their health?
Yeah, okay, so that's a good way to think about it. So, I mean, everyone should try to think about their own health and they should try to make the right dietary decisions, but they should also recognise that they're only going to get so far with that, and their families and their friends are only going to get so far with that. So what you need to do is look for opportunities to try and lobby government, to raise awareness, to get politicians thinking about it.
To do what, though? What are the 3 things that if I came back in 20 years, the whole weight of the Australian population as a group would have gone down? The 3 things that could make a difference.
Okay, so I would say advertising to children. So we need sensible, robust, enforceable restrictions on advertising to children. I think a sugar tax would be a great place to start. I think it's, sugary drinks are an obvious target. They're the tobacco of the food industry. They add nothing. They cause lots of harm. The third thing, I think, is it's mandatory food reformulation. And what I mean by this is every food will have 5% less sugar in it. You won't notice. It won't affect the profitability of the company. But because it's 5% in everything, everyone eats a bit less. And if you get small effects across the whole population, you get profound health effects as a consequence. So those would be my 3.
Okay. Can I just, if I'm coming to the middle, I promise, but just quickly, what would be your 3? Pick up the microphone. You have to move with speed. This is a calorie-taking option. Thank you for helping him.
Speaking to me.
What are your 3 that could bring the weight down of the whole population?
Well, I tend to agree with Bruce on the first 2. I'm not a great fan of reformulation of every food product myself. I believe that reforming crap still leads with crap, and there's a lot of crap food out there.
Tomatoes crap?
No, I don't mean that, but I think in the supermarket about probably more than half the products are crap. They're food. They're not food. Really, they're non-food items.
So you
and I'm
want
not talking
food
about
labelling in supermarkets which has crap, not crap.
That's right. And in fact, I think we should be restructuring what we consider food to be, because a lot of things out there that's labelled food isn't food. It's not made from things grown. It's not even made from things that are derived from things grown or produced. It's made from things that are derived from things that were extracted, that were once part of food, that were
I've got the vision.
Deconstructed and
we
reconstructed.
all go up and down the supermarket. We know the parts you're talking about, but what's your action to reduce the availability of crap?
I think that there needs to be an acceptance that we need to dramatically reduce the portion size and the price of crap, so that good food ultimately is as cheap as crap. Or more importantly, the other way round, that crap is more expensive than good food, because I think good food is actually quite cheap at the moment.
I was just about to help you, Professor, because with alcohol they say increase price, reduce availability, less social harm. So presumably you want to lower the price of non-crap. Will I ask him to fill out the categories, or do we feel we know? But lower the price of healthy food, fresh food probably, unprocessed, and raise the price of very processed sugar-rich food. Can I come now to the individual, if I may? Can I come to you, Susie? Do you want to just grab the microphone? Sure. Susie Burrell is a dietitian with a double honours degree. She's interested in psychology as well as nutrition. She has extensive experience working with children earlier in her career and also with elite sports people. She's now in private practice and sees all manner of individuals, and she has extensive media experience talking about weight loss and nutrition. Can I just ask you very quickly, the focus of our 2 speakers so far hasn't actually been on weight loss. It's been on not gaining extra weight. Your response to that approach?
I think there's a really big difference between population health and then individual advice. And without a doubt, when it comes to the average adult, at least maintaining is going to be a good outcome. And that's one of the recommendations I give whenever I'm speaking to a group. But my job is also to give information for individuals on how to lose weight, because I know, and at the end of the day, most people want to lose weight. And if they lose even a small amount of weight, even a couple of kilos, the health benefits to that are going to be quite significant. So I feel I can comment both on the general advice about, yes, in an ideal world, none of us would gain weight. But then I feel that for individuals, there are massive benefits to weight loss. Most people, if I ask the audience who wants to lose a few kilos, most of us would put our hand up. And then it comes about how do we do that in a way that's sustainable. But I'd actually just like to comment on both the boys, what they're talking about. I think we also don't speak enough about the role of supermarkets, because yes, a sugar tax would be fantastic. Yes, we would like to make fast food and unhealthy foods more expensive. But nobody ever talks about the role that supermarkets have in encouraging us to eat these foods and making them a lot cheaper. And if they have got Woolies and Coles have got enormous power over the food consumption habits of a population, and no one ever talks about them. They're the ones who put the cheesels for 99 cents at the front of the supermarket counter. They're the ones that discount and do the deals with Coke and all the big multinationals. And they're the ones that have the power to encourage those companies to change their formulations, because they're the ones who allow them to stock their food on the shelves. And so for my mind, until big decisions are made, and I've worked in obesity 20 years, until we get a sugar tax, until we get a fast food tax, until Woolies and Coles are given incentives via the government to make healthy food the easy option, because at the moment in Australia it's far too easy to eat rubbish food, we're not going to see big changes, and it's all in an ideal. So my advice at the moment is trying to give people practical things they can do now and tomorrow, because to me these are pipe dreams. They're 20 years away, because we've been talking about them for 20 years and there's been no significant changes. The government doesn't want to touch it because it's expensive, and they're looking long term, and our governments are interested in short term.
So it comes to the question of what drives change, and if I could just put this question to anyone who might want to answer it. I've spent my life going to conferences, and they're forever showing you the demographic bubble and shape, and there's this great big fat thing. It's like a tummy that's putting on too much weight, and it's called the baby boomers. It's a lot of us perhaps in this room. And as we all push up, the cost to the health system is becoming catastrophic, because we're all going to need new knees, and perhaps what proportion of us are going to have type 2 diabetes? Has there been research? Can someone give me a figure? Can I come to you, please? Let me introduce Professor Katherine Samaras, who's Senior Staff Specialist in Endocrinology at St Vincent's and St Vincent's Clinic, and she's Laboratory Head looking at fat tissue in the Diabetes and Metabolism Research at the Garvan. So how many people are likely to get type 2? What is type 2 diabetes, and how many people are likely to get it?
So type 2 diabetes...
Really close and speak up.
Type 2 diabetes is a disorder of glucose metabolism. It affects 1 in 4 people over the age of 70 in Australia at the moment. Of the ones who have actually had a glucose test and know their blood glucose, we think that for every one
really
person...
Really close and speak up, trust me.
What if I get lipstick all over it?
That's good. Think of Mick Jagger. Make love to the microphone.
I'll keep that in mind and not get distracted.
Sorry, but you know, if you almost lick it, that's good.
So 1 in 4 people have diabetes over the age of 70, but 50% of people with diabetes in Australia at the moment actually don't even know they have the condition. So that's why we all need to know our blood glucose right now. If we don't, we need to go and get it checked. The rates are expected to more than double by 2030, and that's based on the growth rates of diabetes in Australia over the last 10 years. So it is an epidemic we have to be really worried about, because it's the main cause of kidney failure and the main cause of blindness today.
So there is an epidemic, but it's going to be of type 2 diabetes.
It's an epidemic. We don't lead the world, thank goodness. Our rates in Australia over the entire plus 18s age is about 7%. In Saudi Arabia, it's 21%. They're the highest rates. But we're catching up, and so are our poor neighbours who don't have access to healthcare. So we can have our heart attack, and if things stay the same, we can be assured we'll get relatively good healthcare if we need our bypass. But the person in Thailand or Vietnam who has diabetes and has a heart attack isn't necessarily assured. So economically, if we look at it internationally, diabetes will undermine most of the economic progress because we're going to lose people when they're at their best in terms of productivity and contributing to the workforce. So it's a real issue. It's a much bigger issue for premature loss of life amongst the third world countries.
So I was hoping to have action points for our audience. So one action point is ask your GP to check your... What do you say?
What's my blood glucose level, doctor?
Okay. What's my blood glucose level, doctor? Will we do it as a group just to check you're awake? No, that's primary trained, and you can see there's a little bit of repetition. I'm going to ask one or two more questions, and then I'll come to my first questions or comments from the audience. I said to you your key messages. Your first one was zip it. What do you mean?
Well,
Close and loud.
As Bruce alluded to, and Susie has, we all eat too much. We do.
You're as skinny as a stick. How do you do it?
Ask me what I had for lunch today.
What did you have for lunch today?
So I woke up at 5:30 this morning, dropped off Sprog 2 at school, 7 o'clock band, had a slice of rye bread with tomato and basil. Mind you, I grow the basil.
I'm starting to
It's quite
hate her. Are you
nice.
starting to hate her?
And then I hit the stumps at work, and was at work from 7:30 till 6:15, and the secretary bought me a full cream latte. Now, in my full cream latte, I got about a sandwich worth of calories, so it's actually more than you think it is. But I didn't have morning tea. I don't need morning tea because, action point number 2, I don't plough fields.
Now, what do you mean you don't plough fields?
Well, most of us are counting steps, and we have our Fitbits, and we may go to the gym, and we may do an hour work at the gym and feel so virtuous in our physical activity. But we actually don't plough fields. We sit on our bottoms most of the time. We drive everywhere. So our opportunities for energy expenditure are really, 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 really reduced. And, you know, Bruce, the point that he made earlier about this tsunami of food coming at us is married to we live a life trapped in our cars. You know, we may want to incidentally go walk from A to B to C to D, but it's actually going to take, we can't get there because it's not actually geographically possible to in the next week. So we drive everywhere. We even argue over the parking spot closest to the lift to come up to here. So there are all of these challenges that we have with physical activity, and with our unzipped attitudes towards food, access to food 24 hours a day, access to very cheap food, $10 buffets, eat all you want, the 99% junk food that Susie alluded to. We are eating far too much for our very low energy expenditure. And when we look at people who do plough fields, because there are a few people in the world that still do, they will do that on a tiny bowl of rice and a little cube of protein, and then they'll go for 8 hours. Now, so we're kidding ourselves.
So I guess it's quite interesting because on the one hand we've had the population perspective, which is, it's not our fault. Look at the way the society's shaped. And then you're, I think, putting much more responsibility back to us as individuals. So is it like a dynamic dance that we have to do between recognising the challenges of our society but still taking personal responsibility?
So we can let society kill us because our politicians are not brave enough to do the sorts of things that both Bruce and Susie have alluded to, and I concur with everything and would go even further on how we should nanny state and make it safe for people to purchase food, because I think just going into a supermarket is an unsafe experience. And so we have to make it safe for people. We need brave politicians who are prepared to do this, but we've been talking in this space for 2, if not 3 decades, and nothing has changed. So it's left to the individual to protect their own health, because we're generally all born with pretty good health, perfect health, I would say. And it's up to us to protect our family and our extended families by creating safe food environments.
Your last recommendation was keep a famine pantry. What do you mean?
So this is the safe family environment. So we all get home and we're tired, and we all go and stand in the pantry thinking, oh, what is there that I could eat here? I'm really bored, I'm really tired. It could be a Saturday morning thing, it could be a Saturday afternoon thing, and you go and you stand in the pantry. Now, when you stand in your famine pantry, if you stand in a pantry and you see, some junk food, some sweet, even some nuts, well, wouldn't we all hoe in an opportunity to eat? All of us will say yes. If the secretary had brought in, instead of a latte, a full cream latte, if she'd brought in, I don't know, cream donuts, I would have had them because they were there. But that's the way we eat.
So
it just has to be
What's the
there.
action point? What should I?
So the
I go
action
home
point
tonight,
is-
what should I be looking at in my cupboard?
Tins of tomatoes and chickpeas. And so none of those are appealing,
Is
are
there
they?
anyone from the Jewish community who's going to fight back? Aren't you famous for your culture of gorgeous food? Can I just get one quick comment on blood pressure and then I'll come to you? Can you? Oh, you've got one, sorry. So just reminding you that I'm talking to Professor Bruce Neal. Tell us about blood pressure.
So we were talking about obesity and I guess the concept that people think they're overweight or they're not, and then we got talking about blood pressure. And when I went to medical school, I was taught that normal blood pressure was 100 plus my age. So if you're 40 years old, it's 140. If you're 80, you're allowed to have a blood pressure of 180. Now, I'm pleased to hear some people sort of anxious about that, because actually, it turns out, I do a lot of research in salt, and salt is one of the main reasons that your blood pressure goes up throughout your life. And what it turns out is that actually, if you lived the life of the caveman, of the field plower, then your blood pressure when you're 80 actually should be your blood pressure when you're 16, when you sort of stopped growing and your blood pressure stopped going up. So we've sort of been lulled into this whole concept of sort of normality and abnormality, when actually almost everything happens in a continuous way. So you put on a little bit of blood pressure, you actually get a little bit of risk. You don't have to be hypertensive to get that risk. Every little bit counts. And there's a lot of evidence that it's exactly the same for obesity. You don't stay fine until you get a BMI of 30 and get obese, or get a BMI of 25 and suddenly get overweight. Every little bit is starting to add up. And so it sort of comes back to the point that Tim was making, is that try not to put any more on, because every little bit's going to do you harm, but also every little bit you could take off would probably do you some good as well.
Thank you. And just one more quick thing from Tim. How significant is exercise in this equation? Or is it all portion control? It's all tin tomatoes and, was it chickpeas?
I'm glad I don't live in Kathy's household. She obviously doesn't have teenage boys either. There's a lot of myths around exercise. If you look at it purely from an energy balance perspective, then yes, the amount of calories you burn up, even in the most intense forms of exercise, is relatively small. And is easily, lost by consumption of a very small treat. So a couple of hours walking, you burn up about 300 calories. So a couple of Tim Tams, bang, there you are. You're already lost all the benefit of that walking. But exercise has a number of important benefits that help you in this effort to keep your weight where it is, and also has enormous health benefits apart from weight. So, we can put aside exercise is extremely important for your health, number one, but it does have potential benefits for your weight as well. Exercise does help improve regulation of those hormones that control your appetite. So a moderate amount of exercise does help to bring back the balance between the amount you consume and the release of those hormones. It has a range of other things like that, and so it's very clear.
It would help regulate sleep, wouldn't it? Which is
good
for weight.
That's right, and help relieve stress, which is one of the things which drives eating. So there's a whole lot of subsidiary benefits of exercise that make it important in managing your weight. And it's quite clear that those people who do exercise regularly are those that are much more successful at managing their weight.
Now, if the panel could help me, I want to come to the audience now to come back to this issue of psychology, comfort eating and those links. But let's open the floor now to any questions or comments at all. Thank you so much. And I'll just wiggle amongst you. If you could all just breathe in and I'll come past. If you could pull in your walking sticks. This is a challenging thing. I'm sorry to tread on you. I don't let go. Do you want to just introduce yourself? I hold it, yeah.
Okay. Diana Oldberg. We were always taught to breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. I wondered your opinion on is there really some veracity in what time of the day you eat? I mean, should we only not eat anything, a large dinner at night? What is the medical truth about what time of the day you eat?
Susie, can I come to Susie first, if I may? Yeah.
I'm sure Katherine's probably got some things to add because this is her area of hormones. But my education is always around the fact that the human body is programmed according to a circadian rhythm, which means whether we like it or not, both physiologically and from a movement perspective, we burn more calories in the first half of the day. And most of us then spend the evening sitting down. And that has, of course, been exacerbated by modern life, where we're not eating dinner until 8, 9, even later at night. And then we're so tired and exhausted from modern life, we reward ourselves with food and lie on the lounge and, of course, overconsume then. So my education has always been around bulking up the calories in the first half of the day, because anecdotally, I also find that when people have had adequate calories and also quality of calories during the day, you don't crave the sugars that you do at night when you've had insufficient calories. Now, if I presented that to a group of dietitians, they would say, where's the evidence for that? And I'd say, just because we don't have the research paper doesn't mean it's not true. It's just that perhaps we haven't tested it in the right way. And so my experience is absolutely we want to consume more food in that first half of the day and then leave at least 10 to 12 hours without food overnight, which means for most of us means finishing by eating at 7 or 8, which, as we know, is sometimes quite challenging.
And Katherine?
And Susie, you can take something to the dietitians, because there's quite a lot of research in that circadian area showing that if you eat in the dark, you actually burn less energy. So when sunlight hits our retina, there are epigenetic changes. They travel down the retina into the brain, down our vagus nerve, and they go to our liver, and they switch on the fat-burning enzymes. Absolutely fascinating research. You need the sunlight on the retina in the morning. When the sunlight disappears, we actually burn, our liver burns less fat. And there's fabulous research linking consumption of food at night through night shift workers and increased rates of obesity and heart disease and depression and diabetes. So that old adage, like many old adages that are steeped in wisdom, are based on good observation. The science is catching up with common sense.
And Katherine, can you repeat what is the action we take, just so we've all got it?
So get up with the sun. Okay, it's early in the morning at the moment, I can tell you. But we should be up in the morning. We should not be up at 9, 10, 11 a.m. We should be up in the morning and going with the birds. Follow the seasons, not only with our activity like sleep, but also with food.
And can I just ask you, because it was put to you by Professor Tim Gill that you didn't have teenagers, and I note that you do have teenagers. And it goes, I suppose I'm asking, and I don't mean this as a sexist thing, but most women are involved in food preparation still, and correct me if I'm wrong in that. What is the role of the mother and the parents in shaping the food expectations of children?
I think parents, because of the way that our society is at the moment, parents and grandparents have to be involved in shaping what our children think is normal to eat. And what we should be shaping that on is our own cultural, historical experiences with food. Now, hopefully there are good experiences there, and we had parents, whether it was a mother or a father, that cooked food from the whole things that Tim was talking about. So they remember that you make a cake, but you only make it for birthdays and special occasions. They remember that they know how to make a roast, and that is a special occasion food. They remember that Monday to Friday meals were fairly simple affairs and consisted of vegetables and a little bit of protein, and they were not big. And this is what we need to be teaching our children.
And most importantly, that they don't need to eat all the time. Because the observation I have of young families, and it starts as soon as they start eating solid food, so we're talking our babies, so if any of the grandparents there are caring for your toddlers, we need time without food. We need at least 3-4 hours. Kids need 2 to 3 hours. I see small children eating every hour, and we never get really hungry. And hence we're constantly overeating. So we need, the take home is, we need gaps in between our eating, and in particular, going back to that point, overnight we need a long period of time without food, because that allows our hormones involved in fat metabolism to return to the levels they're supposed to be. Whereas when you're in a constantly fed state, you don't have that natural hunger and appetite. And of course, when we take that back to small children, they're not learning to regulate their own appetite well, they're only learning to eat and feed regularly. And you only have to go down to Westfield Bondi Junction to see that in action any day of the week.
There was someone here, I think, Sue, you're at the back. Let me just come up. I did a Fred Hollows charity walk in Melbourne on Friday, and I'm still limping. I'll hold the mic.
Yes, I wanted to ask Susie, when she said that we should make fast food more expensive, why don't you try the reverse? Make healthy food cheaper, then people will buy.
Well, the thing about making, and this is quite possibly for one of the other people, but my perception of that would be, is that when it comes to healthy food, you're looking at natural produce. It can be quite challenging to make that cheaper, because of course we want to make sure our farmers and our primary producers are looked after. Whereas when you're bulk producing food, there's a large profit margin on those food products. So it's easier, the incentive to make that from big industry is going to affect the right people, as opposed to constantly slashing the price of our fresh and primary produce. So that would be my understanding.
And could I come to Bruce Neal just quickly on that, because your food policy at the George Institute, do you think the time will come when a slice of the health budget will be transferred to the subsidising of cheaper healthy food for the population as a health intervention? I mean, that's really what's being advocated here, isn't it?
So that's an interesting question. I mean, just to make a quick comment on the relative cost of healthy and unhealthy food, there's actually some pretty interesting research out there at the moment which suggests that actually per 100 grams of food, it's no more expensive to buy healthy food than to buy unhealthy food. And potentially it might actually even be cheaper already to buy the healthier food. But the problem is the healthier food's nowhere near as convenient as the unhealthy food. I mean, you can pick the unhealthy food up and whack it straight down. You've got to, sit in the kitchen and prepare it if you want to eat the healthy food. So I think that's another part of the problem, not just the price piece. Now, in terms of the subsidy bit, I think that's a really interesting question, because when you talk about the opposite, which is taxes, then you just raise red flags. Businesses hate the idea of a tax. So there's a lot to be said for the idea of a subsidy, because you're not going to get that knee-jerk reaction, but you are going to have to pay for it. And I think that's the big question, is who's going to pay for it? Because at the moment, the people who make money out of food, the taxes that come from taxing food companies, they're just so distracted, sort of temporally and organisationally within government, from the people who actually have to pay for the adverse effects that are a consequence of eating bad food.
In a funny way, it just sounds to me like we're all old enough, or many of us here are old enough to remember when smoking was normal. And we've made it now so when you're in a shop and there's often a lot of tradies lined up to buy cigarettes, they're incredibly expensive. And so we've decided tobacco is so dangerous to the population, we've made it expensive. And so maybe those frozen pizzas will become that if we live long enough to see it. But sorry, I'll stop thinking and come to another question.
My name is Deborah, and I've been told by a personal trainer to eat more protein, as in eat 30 grams, in my case, 30 grams of protein at every meal to aid weight loss. Is that actually helpful to weight loss?
So first, check out the credentials of your personal trainer. Check that they know what 30 grams of protein looks like.
What does it look like? Can you do it with your hand?
It's probably that big. It's tiny.
Bitty.
Because a piece of steak that big is about 100 grams. So it would be a third of that size, and that would be insufficient for most adult humans if that was their major part of their lunch or their dinner. So does eating protein help you lose weight? Eating less calories helps you lose weight. So eating more of a particular food doesn't actually meet the energy balance equation. Now, if you're wanting to lose weight, you have to get the calories down, and then you have to have the right composition in your diet so you have good appetite control, so you can stay on track and allow the body to lose weight without becoming incredibly hungry, which is what Susie was referring to before when she was talking about understanding carbohydrates and understanding where they should be in the meal and how much they should be. So please don't think that eating more of something is going to help you lose weight.
And can I just come to Tim Gill, because one of the things you said, Tim, is there are many paths. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, what everyone asks, the first question anyone asks you at a barbecue when you talk about working in this area is, how do I lose weight? What's the best way to lose weight? The fact that there are so many diet books out there, and the fact that there are so many people who swear by certain diet books is a clear indication that there is no one way of eating that helps everybody lose weight. Just like there's no one way of eating that actually suits the health of everybody as well. I mean, first of all, throughout life we have different needs at different times. In different climates we have different needs. But in particular around losing weight, then the most important thing is finding something that works for you. As Katherine said, the only way to lose weight is to eat less calories. And there are many ways to eat less calories. Some people like very low carbohydrate diets. Some people like high carbohydrate diets. Some people like, high protein. Some people, just avoid sugar. Some people give up alcohol, and that's all they do. As long as it results in less calories, whilst at the same time maintaining the integrity of your diet. It's obviously easy to lose weight by eating a diet which is inappropriate for you in the long term. But as long as you find a way of eating that helps you maintain your weight, then that's right for you. Now, if you're Italian, of course, you're going to want carbs, you're going to want pasta, you're going to want, if you're Chinese, you're going to want rice. It's a waste of time me telling you that the only way to lose weight is to give up carbs, because that's nonsense. Just like, Atkins works for some people and South Beach diet works for other people. That's the nature of it. We're all individuals.
Spiritual revelation.
That's
there
right.
are many paths.
Many paths to the top of the mountain.
I've got two questions here, and then I'm going to come to someone in the audience, but I'll hold it. Sir, do you want to ask you a question? Yeah, I don't let go.
You won't let it go. That's very nice. My name is Ziggy, and I would like to ask you a question. Do you envisage in the future that all we will need is to take one pill which will have a lot of minerals, vitamins, will drink a lot of water, and will be so thin that you won't even see us in the night?
Well, I take that as a comment, unless someone would like to react. Yes.
Have you seen the Sleeper, the 1975 Woody Allen film? Because that's what they did in 2200 or something when he came back in that film. Possibly it's the way to go, but would you really want to live in such an environment?
If I may take from this gentleman the social role of food. As I understand, I used to have 5 years on ABC Radio National with a program that did a lot on child development, and I was left with the feeling that if my partner and I sat with the children at night around a table and ate together and spoke, it'd prevent almost everything that could ever happen to them. Can you come, Katherine? Why are you nodding?
No, I completely agree. I think it's about families. It comes back to that. This is how we train our children to eat right and to behave right. We set the right models for them. And we do that by having the right food in the house, by showing them this is the way to eat. And that may be modelled on what your grandparents did when it was probably safer to eat. I think there was certainly fewer food safety things available in the shops then. But this is the key. It's showing the generations that follow that this is the right way, whether that comes down to making appropriate lifestyle decisions, making appropriate behaviour decisions, particularly around appropriate food decisions. But Ziggy, I believe in fairies too. when it comes to the
Susie,
one.
what are you thinking? I can feel you vibrating here.
Well, first of all, I think can we differentiate between nutrition, which is the science, and then eating, which is the behaviour? And eating, of course, is one of life's most simple pleasures. So when people are enjoying the food that they're eating and having good quality food and enjoying it in a social context with friends and family, it becomes much easier to enjoy the food and move away from that whole restrictive diet message. It's about whole food and it's about enjoying it. So my goal always when working with clients is to develop a meal plan, whether you call it a diet, a meal plan, a style of eating, that they like. Because when you like what you're eating, it's easy to do. And that's the key message I would leave here tonight. If you like it, you will do it. And when you're looking at any kind of diet that you're trying to implement and follow with the goal of weight loss, you've got to enjoy it and like it. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and you'll be back on that cycle.
I've got a gentleman here.
Good evening. I have a question about cholesterol. I went to the doctor and my cholesterol came back at 5.9 with a little bolded and highlighted warning, this is a bit high. And my doctor looked at it and said, you're young, that's fine. But I take the point of the gentleman over here about the blood pressure, that as you start going up, it gets a little bit worse and a little bit worse. And at my age, I'm trying to be as healthy as I can because I'll never get any healthier than this, right?
How old are you?
So I'm 25. So my question is, how can I improve my cholesterol, and what about all those other nutrients and things that contribute to health and well-being, and how are we meant to keep track of all that?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
So let me make a couple of comments on your risk associated with that cholesterol level. And I'll let someone else talk perhaps about how to reduce it. So cholesterol's, there's good and there's bad cholesterol. So you need to know if you've got lots and lots of good cholesterol in that 5.9, then you might not worry about it as much as if you've got lots of bad cholesterol. It sounds like it had a red tag attached to it, so you've probably got some bad cholesterol in there. The bad news for you is that the lower your cholesterol, the longer you live. And that's down to pretty profoundly low levels of cholesterol.
Caught my attention.
Wow, it's pretty. There are these staggering new treatments which are available now, which are actually a sort of an injectable form of cholesterol lowering, which drop your cholesterol absolutely into your boots. And they just started trialing these really to check them for safety. And the relatively small safety studies actually showed that they protected people against strokes and heart attacks. So there's really a very strong evidence base for saying that really low cholesterol is really good for you. No, these are...
Just so I can just repeat, he said, are you talking about statins?
No, so these are things called PCSK9 inhibitors. So they're basically, they go way beyond statins in terms of how low they'll take your cholesterol. Now, of course, you're young. So even if you've got a really, if you've got a really, really high cholesterol, then you will manage to have a stroke or a heart attack. But it's pretty hard to have a stroke or a heart attack when you're really young. Even if your cholesterol's really high, you smoke, you're fat, you're diabetic. So the best way to have a stroke or a heart attack is to do all those things and then get older. And I know that's probably not good news it's not good news for many of us in this room. But so what we call your absolute risk, which is your risk of having a stroke or a heart attack this year, is incredibly low. Now, if we put you on a statin or a PCSK9 inhibitor, we could probably decrease that risk by 50 or 60%. But it would be 50 or 60% of almost nothing. So it's probably not worthwhile. And certainly from a societal perspective, all that money we'd have to spend on you, it's definitely not worthwhile, so we wouldn't recommend it. But there are undoubtedly things that you could do to improve your cholesterol, and I'll hand over to someone who can
just
provide that
really
advice.
quickly, if you could, how do you lower cholesterol?
You've got to get your fat balance right in the diet. So a few quick tips for anyone else out there. You want oily fish 3 times a week at minimum. So your salmon, tuna. Remember that tin tuna is not high in omega-3 fats. They've taken it out to make fish oil capsules. So you actually want the oily fish itself. You want 10 walnuts a day. You want a lot of high fibre foods like oats. 1 or 2 slices of a whole grain bread to keep your carbohydrate controlled. You want so much fruit and vegetable, not fruit, I should say just veggies, about 5-7 serves of veggies per day. And I can't see you, but if you've got a couple of kilos on, get rid of it and I guarantee you it'll come down a couple of points.
He's thin with an interesting purple hat.
Yeah, so just concentrate on your fat balance and lots of fibre-rich veggies in particular, and you should get it down into the 4s, I would say anecdotally, just based on my clinical experience.
Now, I'll come back for more questions in a moment. In my questions from now on, I'm going to focus on what we can do to be as healthy as we can be with our weight. And yes. I promise you I will do more, sir. Yeah. Well, thank you. I take that feedback and I will focus on it. I've also been given 3 audience people to get some information from. But why don't I do 2 more questions from the audience and then I'll come to those people. And questions from this side. Has anyone got? Thank you. In this era, the audience is always right. I can come to you if you like.
Hi, so my name's Ravina and I work in a primary school. Unfortunately, I see a lot of children who have loads and loads and loads of packets of things. And it's a very big concern for me. I'm constantly amazed at the amount of rubbish and food that they're eating that isn't nutritious at all. And, every time I say something at a staff meeting, it's often the response from the executive will say a comment like, oh, well, we just don't know what they're eating at home. They might go home and have something nutritious. We're not quite sure. But it's a worry because the kids are not functioning in class and,
Could I just ask you, has the school community ever considered some form of school policy around food or school intervention?
No, there's no school intervention. It's a public school. And they do have crunch and sip, which is great. That's a piece of fruit at 10 o'clock. But besides the crunch and sip, the kids are really eating a large proportion of their lunch is out of packets.
So do you have a question or will I just get their reaction?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was any government policy or anything that was going to go further in terms of supporting maybe making the kids think that the food that they're eating isn't. See, it's a status symbol as well. They like to eat the muesli bar, talk about it with their friends, or whatever it is that they're eating. It's just it's just not nutritious enough for them.
Thank you.
So there are actually good policies that are there already that schools can actually access, public schools in particular can access. Public schools, because of the laws that the Department of Education set up, are actually much more empowered to institute these changes in parental behaviour, which is what you actually want. You want the parents to change what they're putting in the kids' lunchbox.
So can you give us a real example of the kind of strategies a school might implement?
So a lot of schools, just using my children's school, which is a public school, they had the what did you call it? The crisp, crunch and sip. So they were allowed water. That was their sip. And the crunch had to be a vegetable piece or a piece of fruit. They were, the no box policy, which is not currently law, but it's, again, if it's a packet or a box, then it's not in the lunch box. Schools can often use pictorials, which is not to the children. The children are not putting their lunches together. It's the adults that look after them that do this. And they can put healthy lunch boxes together according to the pictures that they see. And these are available resources that schools can access and disseminate very widely. The schools have an obligation to create safe environments for children. They can't, teachers can't be expected to be police people. But at least in New South Wales Health, there is an approach which hopefully will come to fruition, which is working with the Department of Health on canteen policy. Because, of course, it's not just the lunch boxes, it's what's available in the canteen. There should be nothing sweetened available in a canteen. No carbonated drinks apart from water, should they want carbonated water, and no fruit juice, and nothing that comes in a packet.
And in my experience, it's usually a combination of school leadership and P&C leadership that brings about these kind of changes. And another comment? Yes.
I just want to make 2 quick comments. The first is that that this is an area where, in fact, we have seen dramatic improvements in preschool, kindergarten arrangements. Within New South Wales kindergartens and daycare centres, there are fabulous food policies to the extent where parents who bring along put those sorts of products into kids' lunchbox. They come home with a note. I personally, about 10 years, 12 years or so ago, was confronted by a teacher telling me, as a nutritionist, that she didn't know what I did, that this was inappropriate. This sort of food was inappropriate.
What were you giving your child, you monster?
I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it might have been a cookie or something like that.
But you were probably thrilled, were you, to see that happen?
I was. In fact, I think this is where we have seen some dramatic improvements, and we are seeing, on a positive note, we are seeing improvements in the health status and weight status of those young children as a result. It should flow on to primary school, but it starts to unravel a little bit at primary school. And one of the reasons why it's unravelled is that the current school canteen guidelines are based on these nutrient criteria. And unfortunately, it's still possible to meet those nutrient criteria and produce crap food just by reducing the portion size of it. So chocolate Tiny Teddy biscuits apparently meet the school canteen guidelines and have a lovely little stamp that the manufacturers made up themselves saying school canteen approved. So it's no wonder that parents are a little bit confused about these sorts of things. They put in crisp packets because the very small packets of crisps also fit well under those current school canteen criteria.
Sadly, we need the executives of Coles and Woolworths to have relatives with type 2 diabetes. Was there a question down here? I'm sure someone was waving. I'll come to here and then I'll come to you, madam. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Judy. I'm interested in the relevance, apart from weight, of waist measurements, particularly in relation to type 2 diabetes. So if one has a large waist but is happy with the overall weight, is that of any relevance?
Thank you. Who's the best to answer this? You tell me, guys. Do you want to go, Katherine? Yeah.
So even if you're slim and you have central obesity, it is a risk factor for heart disease as well as diabetes and premature death. And there have been really good studies that have shown this time and time again. My own view is that you should know your waist as well, and it's such an easy thing to do with the tape measure. 80 centimetres for women, 90 centimetres for men. It's pretty tight. But if you know that, I mean, as Tim said, you know because your clothes are tighter. Yeah. So I think it is relevant, and it's a greater predictor of premature death if you are slim and you carry all the weight in the middle.
Is it possible to reduce one's waist measurement apart from reducing one's calories, in which case you might lose the weight somewhere else?
So the only way to get the balance in the fat bank down is to spend the money, just like in a bank balance. You have to spend that energy, and you do that by having lesser calories in and more energy out. So to lose fat, you need to lose weight. If you want to try and build up your muscle, you can do that, and it may counterbalance the loss in weight. But the only way to get rid of fat is to vacuum it out or lose it through the standard ways of weight loss.
I'm just going to come at that point to...
Can I just clarify before you go on?
Yes.
Because to answer the lady's question, when you do lose weight, it does come off preferentially from this store here, because this is a store which is easy to put on weight on and easy to take it out, and that's part of the reason why it becomes a problem, is that fat comes in and out too easily. So generally, if you lose weight and you have a large waist, then you'll preferentially lose more from the waist than you do from the rest of your body.
The reason I've grabbed Jenny Goldstein, who's a registered psychologist working at Shaw Surgical, is because there was reference to the vacuuming out of weight, and I know that's not exactly what you guys do, but can you just explain what your job is?
I don't vacuum the fat out. No. I work as a psychologist in a practice where there are people who have...
Could you speak up?
The patients we have in our practice have bariatric surgery because they're morbidly obese, so they carry enough weight that they have negative health effects because of their weight.
And what's bariatric surgery? Can you just explain what that involves?
I'll be able to do that better.
Just
So it's keyhole surgery where they take out a part of the stomach, and that's what it's called a sleep gastrectomy, and so they get a smaller pouch to hold the food.
When you say morbidly obese, how is that diagnosed? Is it about a particular weight or is it very individual?
Well, it's about the BMI measurement, which our guys do about above 40, or comorbid illnesses like diabetes, arthritis, sleep apnea.
And when I spoke to you, I said, what really helps people? And you talked a bit about modifying behaviour. Can you explain what you mean? What do you set out to do as a psychologist helping these people?
It's not easy, but it is modifying behaviour. You can't stop eating. So it's introducing food as a social, eating as a social behaviour. So not sneak eating, becoming mindful of eating. So being aware of what you're eating, engaging your brain and not just your mouth.
That sort of work that you're doing with morbidly obese people, is that relevant to all of us?
I think it should be relevant to all of us. So not to pass by the pantry and have a smorgasbord from the pantry. If you think of third world countries where they don't have refrigeration and they only buy what they need, there's no obesity there.
So what's mindful eating?
Engaging and thinking about what you're eating, tasting it, finishing what you're eating.
Isn't it interesting? They're almost like skills we've lost as a society. You also referred to habit disorder. What does that mean?
Well, you get into the same pattern of behaviour. You come home, you're exhausted, you eat. You don't really think about what you're eating. It's almost like a welcome home. The pantry's welcoming you home. The fridge is welcoming you home. You do that before you really think about what you're doing.
It's interesting, that notion of welcoming. So you're really working on people's emotional relationship with food?
Yes. Which historically has been the template was set a long time ago, and when they have a mood problem, then there's a perfect storm.
And can I ask you, that expression comfort eating, what does that mean?
On the couch with the TV on, you're not really thinking about what you're doing. You've got the ice cream in the freezer, or the leftover cake, or the leftover kids' dinner, and so you just finish it off because it's better than giving it to the dog.
And how do you change that if you've been doing that for a long time? It's hard?
Well, by the time they come to our practice, they want to change, or they have to change. And by the time you make that appointment with a psychologist, half the motivation is there, that you've made that appointment and you want to come in and you need to change. And life's becoming uncomfortable. The clothes aren't fitting well. It's difficult to move around. They're weary.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Would you give her a round of applause, please? And I just want to introduce you to two people from Wolper. If I could ask Dr. Ben Basger to come out, please, who's a pharmacist working at Wolper Jewish Hospital, just back from South Africa, has come from the plane to us. So give him another clap, please. And also, could I ask Linda Cummins to come out, who's an accredited practicing dietitian and a consultant dietitian at Wolper. And I'm just going to stand between you. I want to focus, if I may, on your role at Wolper and how you as a pharmacist within the team, if you could come close to me, don't be afraid, what you do to help someone who's trying to either stop gaining or even reduce. What's your key role?
So I suppose it would be good to say there are two aspects of it. The first aspect is to make sure that people have appropriate information, correct information. I deal with people who are refugees from this esteemed panel. They want to take responsibility by buying a medicine. And all of these aspects that have been discussed this evening go by the way when they look at this bottle of medicine that is going to suck the fat out of their body. And it's going to make the cheesels invisible. And so, in the first instance, we need to reassure them that, despite the fact that people often turn to medicines, there is no magic medicine. Pharmaceutical companies have been desperate to develop one, and they've fallen by the wayside time and time again as adverse effects have developed. defects with heart valves, psychiatric disorders, and so the complementary and alternative medicine people get very busy. So I suppose in the first instance it's to say that notable among the discussion this evening has been lack of information about some magic medicine.
There isn't one.
There isn't one. The second aspect is to say that medication review is something that's very important, especially for people over 65, and it's recommended that generally it should be done once a year. There are medicines that can cause weight gain, and that can be important in people who are have a problem with weight. And also there's the support from a pharmacist to add to the voices that you've heard this evening for reinforcement and reassurance. Yes, too much weight is no good. Yes, you need to do something about it. Yes, these are the avenues that you might pursue.
Thank you so much. And yes, thank you. A round of applause is great. And Linda, you're also at Wolper, and you've given me 3 key messages, so I'll take them quickly and go back to questions. Be realistic. What are you meaning there?
I believe that sometimes people will get taken up with the media. They expect to lose weight very, very quickly. They don't stop and think that, yes, stopping gaining weight might be the best thing to start with, and instead they want to lose 5 kilos pronto. Some of them come into our hospital wanting to lose weight very, very quickly, get bitterly disappointed when it doesn't work out that way. So I think it's really important to set realistic goals if you're A, trying to maintain weight, and B, trying to lose weight.
And being practical.
Being really practical, of course, you've got to really like what you eat. You've got to have the skill set to be able to cope with the food demands that are put upon you. Not everybody can eat and prepare their food themselves, and they require other people to do it for them. So working around a practical way of achieving it with each individual is what I mainly do.
And you also emphasise what's been said tonight, enjoying what you eat is critical.
Absolutely. Food obviously has a vital role for all of us to be happy. Nobody likes being hungry. Sometimes I do have to tell my clients that they have to be a little bit hungry, and there's nothing scared about being hungry. But no one wants to be hungry. Everyone loves food. We talked quickly about the family and the role of the family meal being really important for young people, which is quite true. But increasingly I see a large number of us who live alone, who have no family. And you look equally at the restaurants and the food halls, and why are those community tables there? They should become a community health sharing table. And we should form those little communities or little families, even if you do live alone. Share your meals with other people that you live with in the flat. They might be a stranger, but perhaps you can start to share a plate. You will eat less because you're sharing it with someone else.
That's a fact, is it?
I think so.
And look, just finally, that specific role of yours in Wolper, if someone's had surgery or some other procedure, you get quite detailed between both the plan and the implementation. Can you just explain that?
Yes, I see clients both privately in my private practice, but at Wolper I see clients within the hospital as they are referred by the medical team, and I serve the link between food service. So I ensure that the special arrangements people need can be met and are given to those clients by stomping into the kitchen, having a discussion with the chef, having a discussion with the girls and saying, what are you giving that for? So it's really important not to just pretend to be on a special diet, but to actually action it.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our pharmacists as well. Could you give them a round of applause? So, questions or comments for the from you? Thank you. This is very good that you're right at the back. Do you want to walk towards me and meet me halfway? Or I could come... Oh, okay, no, I'll come all the way there. Sorry, where was it? You? Yes, thank you.
Good work, Julie. Okay, so there's been a lot of talk about food, and I think Tim mentioned alcohol for the first time this evening, and I just wanted to ask, you know, when you're taxing sugar, I don't know if alcohol's got sugar in it or carbs or whatever it's got in it, but is there a possibility of taxing alcohol? And I know for a fact that many people drink alcohol and that adds to their weight problem.
Thank you. Who'd like to give us some information and also practical advice around alcohol?
I might as well start. Alcohol is actually an area where we are achieving some gains in Australia. Surprisingly, Australia's alcohol consumption is going down at the moment, and the biggest gains are actually in the very young adults, which is a good thing. Alcohol does obviously contribute excess calories and unnecessary calories when consumed in large amounts. You can get rid of it. Obviously, alcohol can be part of a healthy, happy sort of social aspect to eating. Alcohol is taxed already. It's taxed, quite a considerable amount. There are considerable excise duties on alcohol. And the people working in the drug and alcohol field are obviously pushing to increase those levels of taxation. They would see that would add to the gains that they've already achieved in terms of reducing alcohol consumption and making it less available. Unfortunately, all those consumer goods, alcohol, food, as well as all the electronic things we buy which take the place of exercise, are all gone down quite dramatically in real costs in over the last couple of decades, and that's probably contributing to the problem. But alcohol isn't forgotten. It's there. And it's something that is being addressed, but of course, like most other things, are very powerful lobby groups which are pushing against, making further gains in terms of alcohol consumption.
And Susie, could I just, if I may, come to Susie and just from an individual planning perspective, alcohol and other drugs, where does that come into your planning with the individual?
Well, the message is that when you're drinking alcohol, all the food that you're eating is likely to be being stored. So the issue for me with clients and weight gain is what they're consuming when they're drinking, because usually you're consuming high-fat food, you lose your inhibition, so you tend to eat more, you're not regulating yourself. And so the take-home message is when you do choose to have a couple of drinks, be really mindful of the type of calories you're consuming with it, and the fewer calories you have, the better it's going to be for weight control, because the body is very busy burning off that alcohol, and you generally don't get to the food that you're eating with it.
And what about marijuana? I mean, there's a huge proportion of the population who are smoking marijuana, and doesn't that increase hunger? I mean, there's an expression called the munchies.
Yeah, quite right. So we should actually talk about drugs and food consumption. So marijuana, of course, makes you eat. It puts you out of your usual judgment, and all restraint is out the window. But there are a number of prescribed medications that promote weight gain, and people should know about them because doctors often do prescribe them without warning that this drug can make you gain 5, 10, 30 kilos. And they are things like cortisone or prednisone. So if you are ever prescribed this, you need to be super careful and maybe get some nutritional advice to make sure you don't put on weight when you start these medications. Antidepressants, all of them, anticonvulsants, all of them will cause weight gain. A lot of diabetic medications can make you put on weight. So again, this is an area where we need to watch weight anyway. If you're starting insulin or some of the other medications for diabetes, they can promote weight gain. And then finally, beta blockers, which are used for a lot of cardiac conditions. Antipsychotics, which should be used mostly for psychotic illness, but are being prescribed often for sleep. And so most of the antipsychotics prescribed these days are not for severe psychotic illnesses.
Are you thinking things like Seroquel?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're prescribed to help people sleep at night. Honestly, you'd be better to be awake all night than putting on 20 kilos.
And Katherine, one of the things I was going to ask Katherine about is she works and does work around vulnerable populations. So in a sense, you've run through some there, someone who may have mental health or sleep issues, anxiety, depression, whatever. But we haven't talked about socioeconomic class. And if I could give you an image, if you go to the park at Balmoral, near Mossman, in the morning, there are a whole lot of whippet-thin women dragging large truck tyres around. They're trying to plough fields. I'm not joking, it's true. And I think you'd find the same around Vaucluse or, I don't know, there's Bellevue Hill, I'm not sure. So I guess whereas I go a lot to Wellington, which is half an hour before Dubbo, so it's 5.5 hours west, and as you go across what they call the sandstone curtain, everybody doubles in size, all the children as well. So where does economic class fit into our population planning? In a nutshell, as we say in the media. Could someone give him one that's on?
Got a red light. Oh, it's supposed to be
It might be the battery, yeah.
It's supposed to be green, I see. Yeah, I mean, obviously the burden of obesity is not shared equally across the community, and one of the big areas where there's a great deal of disparity is with social economic situation. There's a lot of reasons behind that. It's not just that people from less educated backgrounds don't know what to eat and so eat crap. There's a lot of issues about the fact where you live and the amount of time that you have, the amount of time you spend commuting to work and getting back to work, the fact that both parents need to work, so you don't have necessarily the same opportunities to sit around and have those family sort of meals, particularly if the kids have to get out to sport and back, and all those sorts of demands tend to intensify in certain families. But
so if I could go to solutions, is there, to your knowledge, any of you, government or other policy that's endeavouring to intervene at a population level in those high-risk areas? Like, I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Dubbo RSL, but it's almost a machine designed to kill people. All the food, I do a lot of conferences there, is fat. It's a devastating thing to go to the Dubbo RSL because it's a big Aboriginal population, everyone's massively overweight.
So this is the reason why we need things that change the environment, and this is actually one of the reasons why I like food reformulation, because yes, you are still eating crap, but you've got to recognise that huge numbers of people are going to eat fast food, they're going to eat convenience food because it's cheap and it's easy and it's convenient. So, you know, in the drug space, we're very happy to take a harm minimization perspective on things, which basically says people are going to do this, so let's give them clean needles to inject themselves because they're less likely to get hepatitis or they're less likely to get HIV. So if they're going to eat a burger, let's make it with 10% less fat, or let's make it 5% smaller, because that is going to help. And the beautiful thing about that approach as well is that the people who get the greatest benefit are the people who eat the worst food. So it's a very beautiful thing in that it sort of auto-targets the people who need it most. It's not the perfect solution, I would absolutely agree with Tim there, but it is a practical intervention.
Questions or comments from the audience? Thank you. I'll be straight there, give me a tick.
Yes, I can tell you about my experience losing weight, because I had a friend who was older than me and the same height, and he said he weighs 64 kilos, and at that time I was 84. So he thought I was too fat and I should lose weight. Well, I did lose weight. I got down to about 66, but the only way I could do that is by staying home, not going anywhere, not meeting any friends, only going out when I had to pay a bill at the bank or go to the post office or just to buy milk and bread or cereals at the supermarket. When summer came and I started to go out a bit, I quickly put on already 8 kilos. So I'm still in advantage, but I'm quickly going back to the weight I have. So the only way to lose weight is not to eat, really.
Susie, would you respond to that? The social side and weight gain.
There's no doubt that depending, I don't want to say change your friends, the research would suggest that we become like the people we spend our time with, which would suggest that if you're surrounding yourself with people who do consume excessive calories, now that's a general statement based on some evidence, but absolutely we eat significantly more in a social context, the kinds of foods that are available to us. I'm assuming you're probably going to cafes, and as some data, we did an analysis of foods in a food court, and basically if you make a sandwich at home and then you buy a sandwich in the food court, you will consume double the calories. Now, I went and calculated that myself with the raw ingredients. So we eat about double when we're eating away from the home, and so that's a good reference point to know that in your day, if you regularly eat away from the home in cafes, at other people's homes, when we are at home, you have to almost compensate to eat more lightly to make up for that.
Susie, you're talking to some of the Europeans that came to this country and gave us a lifestyle worth living.
I know.
I'm old enough to remember Australia before the cafe.
Yeah.
It was horrific.
Absolutely. But there are, the take-home message is that there are strategies. If you know that meal is going to contain double, maybe you don't need dinner. So it's probably just some techniques and strategies to help you balance those calories, because that is an observation. We will eat more when we're eating more socially and in that context.
And I wasn't just meaning to joke, because the club reference I made is important. I'm wondering if there's work that's been done on the link between gambling and weight gain, because if you go into all the clubs, which is where a lot of older people go for companionship, there's incredibly cheap food, and it's all funded by the pokies, and many older people go to clubs for companionship.
Exactly, and it's usually high-fat fried food. So another take-home message is if anything's fried, try and avoid it when you're away from the home, and seek out the vegetables, seek out the roast, because often they're there. It's just knowing and being reminded to look for them. If you can, or split it with your friend, because that meal's got double the calories that you need.
You've got someone here.
Just one question. Why is it, being a registered nurse myself, why is it that carbs are regarded as the baddies? When I studied nursing, we needed carbs for effective brain function.
What is a carb, and then an answer? Yeah.
Well, the body runs on carbohydrate. It's the basic fuel for the muscles, the liver, the brain. Now, there's two aspects to it. The first is that the type of carbohydrates is of utmost importance. So if you're only consuming your carbohydrates from fruit, from vegetables, from dairy food, trust me, you won't have a problem. But that's not where Australians get their carbs from. Australians in general get their carbs in a processed way, whether it's biscuits, white bread, snack food, fast food, and so it's the type that generally we're consuming, sugar-sweetened drinks, juices. And then on top of that, the biggest shift that we've seen is the significant reduction in physical activity. So because our muscles burn our carbohydrate, if we're inactive and not moving very much, we need far less, and yet the types that we commonly turn to are concentrated forms. So classic example I'll give you, going back to the 80s, if you remember the types of bread you probably made your kids' lunches with, they were small slices of tip-top bread. Now the slices barely fit into the toaster, and yet that's still counted as 2 slices of bread, and it's got up to double the amount of carbohydrate that was in the old school bread, and yet we're doing less activity. So we need fewer carbohydrates, and yet the ones readily available to us have got double the fuel. So how do we manage that? What is the take home? We have to be very strict on the type and the amounts of carbohydrate that we're consuming, and we need to basically get it from our natural sources, our fruits, our vegetables, our legumes, and keep the added ones, the biscuits, the processed foods, to an absolute minimum to allow us to still burn the amounts we need for the brain and the muscles in a significantly reduced active state.
Could you give her a clap? She's doing a good job here.
Yeah, I'm fine.
No, I hold it. Yeah.
I am working in a Jewish community center, and if you can imagine, about 60 people who come to spend their time. This gentleman put weight in our place. If you can imagine, there is about 60 people who come in the morning. They want a cup of tea and a biscuit. Then they get a soup and a sandwich. We change margarine to butter. I will change the tuna because you just said there is not omega-3, so I'm going to make a revolution there.
And so the question?
and then they have a little piece of cake and little fruit. These people are in age around 80. How important it is to cut this sugar and the biscuits out for them?
It's a good question, I think, and it probably is a personal opinion, but in general, I think if you're making it to 80, I'm sort of inclined to say eat what you want. Because the doctors disagree with me, I don't know. But
That's because you're young.
The bulk of people I'm seeing are between, say, I don't have many people over the age of 80 that I'm seeing in practice. Yeah, and I think it's a personal decision based on that. And we're here because if discussing weight, if somebody doesn't want to lose weight, again, that's their preference. If the question is, can they cut back to lose weight, I'd say absolutely, ditch the extra cake and fruit at the end and you'll be on the right track. So I think it comes down to, again, their personal goals and their health goals. But I think if my mum and dad are in their 80s, I'd probably say eat what you like.
Even tomatoes and bean and
chickpeas.
Yeah. You were nodding agreement. So are you going to turn 80 and change your diet?
Yes. I think you get to a certain age where you can actually choose to do what you want to do. If you've done your innings, as far as the country is required, the country needs you. Where do we need you? We need young people who can participate in the workforce and pay for all our pensioners and our health. So we need the midlife to continue working until we're all 70. And so we will, with good health. And then we can enjoy ourselves.
May I predict to you, my mother is 92 and still absolutely scrupulous in her diet, which has been very good for 30 years. It's now the way she eats, and she's very happy with it.
I disagree. I think that we should be, it ought to be normal to eat healthy. It didn't ought to be that we suddenly think, oh, I've been really good, now I can do what I want. We have to change that way of thinking, I think. It has to be the norm. Because there's no doubt, if you're 80 and you're healthy and then suddenly you start eating crap, you're going to make yourself sick or you're going to increase your risks, and you don't need to.
I think we should send him down to the community centre and tell all the girls that they're not getting their cake.
my friends reckon that if I could have half an hour with everyone, I could get the whole of Australia to eat less salt. But I haven't got the time to take it on.
But that's the cake, not the salt, that's the cake. You tell them they can't have their cake and we'll see what you're talking about.
I'm going to try to get 2 more questions, so here's one.
You've talked about psychology.
Can you speak up?
Oh, sorry. You've talked about psychology and government control of the necessity for that. But the human body is a machine that processes food into energy, and the main part of that, I believe, is gut flora. And I wondered if you have, it's a growing important area of research, and I wondered what is being done in Australia about that.
At the moment I'm running a study in type 1 diabetes at Diagnosis to change gut flora and see if we can change the immunology of diabetes and change how long people can actually continue to produce their own insulin with this awful disease of type 1 diabetes. Gut flora is really important. When you eat crap, I like the term crap, when you eat crap, you end up with crap gut flora. Crap gut flora inflames the body. It makes the whole body inflamed, and it's that systemic inflammation that promotes coronary artery disease. It contributes to cancer, it contributes to diabetes, it contributes to diabetes. How do you change your gut flora? You eat the wonderful leafy greens that Susie's been talking about. You eat the resistant starch, which is in the whole grain breads that Susie was talking about. You do not need to buy probiotics. Please do not think that taking a probiotic tablet, because remember, we don't really believe in fairies, taking a tablet is not going to change your gut flora. Buying proprietary drinks in a supermarket is not going to change your gut flora. Yogurt in part with resistant starch, through whole grain foods, through leafy greens, Jerusalem artichokes, fermented vegetables, pickles. So for those of you with, herring and onions for breakfast in the morning, I don't know if you can do that, herrings. But these sorts of fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, if you want to get, sort of up on the sort of the Korean, the Asian aspect of fermented foods. These are the things that will revolutionise your gut flora. Now, if you have a lot of money and you don't get queasy about this idea, you can do a fecal transplant.
You're going to start freaking them out. Look, now you've said it, can you just quickly explain?
Okay, so
but I mean, in what
a fecal
circumstances?
transplant.
But in what circumstances would someone seriously consider this? They'd have to be ill.
We
wouldn't they?
mostly do it when people have a really severe infection in their gut because they've been on antibiotics. It's usually in intensive care, and there's fantastic evidence. You do a fecal transplant, healthy feces from one person transplanted into another person. That is a fecal transplant. But there's fantastic evidence if you take a fecal sample from a lean, healthy person and you put it into an overweight person, their metabolism changes and they start to lose weight. So we can change...
It's evidence, it's freaky, but it's true. Now we've got one more gentleman here with a question.
Hello, my name's George. Mine is not a question, more on a comment. Having grown up with grandparents who did the cooking in the days gone by and which were using copper, not stainless steel cookware, we had all the benefits of getting iron in our, iron pots, not copper, in our meals. We don't get that today. The second thing is we can buy decent food. It's not all crap. We have a lot of places now you get on TV and shows which are fantastic, and hearing Susie many times on the radio, you can really go and pick up good food anytime, any place, but you have to be prepared to look for it, to get it, and then to eat it yourself. And the routine of coming home at night time, we are overworked, time poor, and we really can't cook a meal like my grandmother used to at the time when you come home at 9 o'clock and sit down, which I do quite often after work, and it's about 10 o'clock that I'm having dinner.
That was a comment, but I guess the one thing I'd say is one factor in the obesity rise, the changing role of women. I mean, if we look at a variable that's hit at the same time, it's not just supermarkets and fast food, it's also women working. And when you go to places like London, I mean, I'm sure you people travel, the supermarkets are designed for women to not have to cook much anymore. Everything's pre-packaged, pre-done to an extraordinary degree, much more than we've got here. I mean, that was actually a question. Is that a sociological factor?
I think women are the victims in many, many different ways. They've gone from being at the home where they're a homemaker and their duties were predominantly around looking after the children and caring for the food and preparing and providing for everybody. Now they work 2 jobs because they mostly still do that, and then they'll go and work for 40 hours at least, spend perhaps 10 hours per week commuting, and then there's the expectation around the food. For a lot of them, if you look at the dormitory suburbs of Sydney, this is a really great experiment. I show these slides when I give talks all the time. Just Google, pick any fast food chain and Google map and just put the name in. And look at where all the little red dots come up. There's about 1 on the North Shore generally, 1 in Bondi Junction, usually in the eastern suburbs, and then every other one will be around all of the exits on the freeways that go to the dormitory suburbs that are the cheaper housing. Now, people in those areas are trapped. They'll take 2 hours as they're captive in their car to get there and back, perhaps even 3 hours. And then they're not going to be confronted when they get to the exit of the highway with some organic food providore or the kind of food quality that you've talked about, George. They're going to be confronted with fast food, and it's going to be quick and easy. They don't even have to leave their car. They're not going to have access to the types of food that you're talking about. So whilst they are available for those that have time and money, for most working women, they are not going to have the time and they're not going to have the money, and it's going to come down to those frozen pizzas we talked about, or some other meal that can be, put in a plastic bag and taken out, and cost more than it would cost to put an organic chicken on the table for the family. An organic chicken will cost less but I'll just have to take an hour and a half to cook it. But it will cost less than buying some brand fast food chicken.
It's time to finish, but I'm not going to finish until I've asked Professor Bruce Neal to say something about salt. He has been trying to slip it in all night. So what's your take home to us about salt?
Okay, so the bottom line with salt is that it kills about 1.7 million people each year around the world. You evolved as humans to live on a tiny amount of salt, about 1 gram a day, and we now eat in Australia about 10 grams a day. It's hidden in everything, So it's really hard to get rid of.
Where's it hidden? Give me an example.
So the most common source of salt in the Australian diet is bread, which you wouldn't think of as a salty product, but it actually, you consume quite a lot of it, and it's actually got remarkably more salt in than you would think. The second most common is breakfast cereals, which again, you don't think of as salty. Anything you can do to get salt out of your diet, and again, it's not easy, it's all about cooking from base products, not adding salt, not adding salty sauces. It's going to be a wonderful thing for your health. So
Turkish bread. Everyone's shocked. Turkish bread has got such a lot of salt, 1,000 milligrams per serve. So when you go to all the cafes in the east and they all serve the Turkish bread, swap to your sourdough because Turkish bread is packed with salt.
And
Ladies,
these kimchis and things, like, they might be good for your gut and flora, but not good for your blood pressure.
Ladies and gentlemen, I feel you and them and our studio guests have done a good job. Could you clap and burn calories? And I would like to hand back to Dr. Alan Schell. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julie. Again, wish you a good year. So next year we've actually got a number of topics that cover much of what the group has said here. We're going to talk about diabetes, we're going to talk about cardiac and vascular disease and anxiety next year, and the first talk we will have will be the 1st of March. So we'll keep you posted, make sure that you're on our list that we have, keep you on email and by mail, and I want to wish you all a happy Christmas, a happy Hanukkah and a happy New Year, and we'll see you next year, and stay healthy and do lots of walking and don't eat too much. Thank you.